today's class, and he would be joining us tomorrow. But he has asked for the recording so he can have a look at the recording and come prepared with whatever homework for the next class tomorrow.
Okay.
To what use cases are and how it is used, and how we can create a basic use case as part of requirements documentation.
Okay.
So use case is a very commonly used UML diagram that is used to depict the business requirements. So use case diagrams are a standard notation that has a standard notation that implies how the user or the actor, in this case we refer to users as actors, interact with the system in discussion. All right.
Okay.
So if there is a particular system and a particular user is performing a certain activity, the use case diagram depicts how the system should react back to the actor. Now, the actor interacting with the system could be a human user, or it could be another system, performing some activity with this particular system. It could be, basically it's an external party interfacing with the system in discussion.
Okay.
All right. So now let us see how use cases are created and how they are recorded. So now use cases are not standalone documents. So, these are part of the functional requirements, or sometimes used to explain the to-be state very clearly. So that the users can understand what is going to be the future processes, right?
Right, correct.
All right. So what I'm having here on screen is a template for a use case. So, the introduction formalities would be on the first couple of pages: the project name, ID, executive sponsor, the project manager, and the business analyst who is creating this, the date of creation of the document, and then the table of contents. We'll move on. Here, the example is the ATM example that we have used. How should the system respond when a user tries to, perform certain activity with the ATM machine? So as we have already discussed, here is the revision history that goes with, version 0.01, 02 for the revisions, and 03, 04 until it becomes an approved use case. It would be 0.0 or 0.11 or whatever it is. The approved version becomes a 1.0. You've seen that. So I'll move on to the next area. Again, this is the current state of the document. It says if the document is accepted, you give a check here. The document is accepted pending the changes noted. The document is not accepted. It gives the current approval status of the document. Again, approvals are attached here by the executive sponsor, project sponsor, team, different stakeholders basically. So this has the use case list, basically the index of the number of use cases that are being used in this particular document. And then let's come to the example. Okay. So in this document, we are not having the use case diagram, but what we are having is a use case narrative. So what I'm going to do is explain to you first what are the how to fill in the use case narrative, and then we'll move on to the diagram. Usually the other approach is followed. Usually the approach is, you would try to first create the diagram and then explain the diagram, but the other way around is easier for better understanding. So let's see how to fill in this document first. And then once you get an idea on some of the concepts like basic flows and alternative flows and includes and extends, then I'll take you through the diagram. Because understand, use case is a very important UML diagram. So the use case narrative is a supplement that helps readers understand better what's there in the diagram, what you're trying to explain to them.
Okay.
So we are looking at the ATM transaction example, and the use case here is this. What you're seeing here is a narrative, and again, like I said, there are more than 1,000 ways to prepare any document. What we are seeing here is a very common template that explains you all the contents. And this could vary from organization to organization, plus or minus some of the contents that are being presented here. But the core crust of the use case narrative remains the same. Some organizations might have a little less details compared to what you see here. Some organizations might have a little more details compared to what you see here. It might be in a different template. The way it is presented might be different, the format might be different, but the core contents remains the same.
Okay.
So again, this gives a ID so that every use case can be individually identified. It could be, again, depending on each organization's naming convention, it might vary. It could be in some organization, ABC underscore 0.1001, or it can reference to the document to the requirement ID that we gave in the requirements document, FR001 underscore 101 or 102, whatever. So this could also be a reference to the requirements that you're preparing. We already have requirements documented in the requirements document. Now,
okay.
these are addendums. These diagrams are addendums to those requirements to make the user understand clearly what the future state is going to be. Now, again, use cases can also be created to make the user understand the to-be processes. There are cases where you sometime as a business analyst are trying to convert an existing system, or replace an existing system with a modern system. So in those cases, it's quite possible that first you have to study the existing functionalities. It might be a 10, 15, or even 20-year-old system that you're trying to replace. So there might not be enough knowledge, and all stakeholders have to first understand the to-be processes very well. So in those cases, the business analyst might perform a study on the existing system and try to, do a lot of documentation on the as-is and then the to-be. So in these cases as well, you might perform some detailed analysis on the existing system and try to come up with the as-is, and then you would jump into the to-be analysis.
Okay.
So, these are again the basics: the use case ID, the use case name. Each use case would have a unique ID and a unique name, created by most often the business analyst, 99.99% of the time. Last updated by, let's say, your senior business analyst who reviews it, makes some modifications. The name could go here, or if it is you, your name could go here. Date created, last revision date, so that we keep track of this document. All these versionings and last revision dates are all to ensure that everybody is looking at the latest document, because documents go through, different changes when you have different stakeholders in the whole process of trying to build this requirements document or the use case diagrams.
Okay.
An actor. Can you read who an actor is? Are you
Sure.
able to read this?
Yes, I can see it. An actor is a person or other entity external to the software system being specified, who interacts with the system and performs use cases to accomplish tasks. Different actors often correspond to different user classes or roles identified from the customer community that will use the product. Name the actor that will be initiating this use case, primary, and any other actors who will participate in completing the use case, secondary.
Fantastic. So an actor is, like I said, an actor is the person who is interacting with the system. it could be a person or some other external entity that is, performing some action to accomplish certain tasks with the system. Okay.
Okay.
Different actors might have different roles. They're using this product or software system or application or product. So in this section, we would name all the actors. Let's say in our example, the ATM example, the customer, with a bank account, let's be clear, not everybody can access your ATM. Either should be a customer of your bank or some other bank that can use this particular machine. Okay. So then you would give a brief description of the reason and for using this use case and what should be the outcome. So in this case, the whole description would be a user trying to use a ATM machine and authenticate his user credentials and withdraw cash. So let's say this is your use case description. Now, trigger. What could be the first event that could trigger a business is the use case. In this case, the trigger could be the user entering their ATM card, right? It could be their ATM card or debit card or credit card. So that's a trigger for the whole event to be initiated. Now, the next steps that are to follow cannot happen unless the user swipes their ATM card or debit card or credit card. There's no possibility that this whole event could be triggered without this happening. So the trigger event is mentioned here. Now, what are the preconditions? Number one, the user should have an activated, ATM card. Now, if you do not have a ATM card or a debit card or a credit card, you just cannot trigger this event. Number two, the user should have a valid bank account either with this bank or some other bank, because all these ATMs are connected and applicable for Visa, Master, or Amex, or PayPal, or whatever it is. So the user should have an account with any of the partner affiliates or partner banks. All right. Let's say you do not have a bank account with any of these, or you do not have a credit card, then it's not possible for you to trigger this event. So a precondition is, as simple as it sounds, a precondition is some basic criteria required to trigger this particular event. And postconditions. What are postconditions? Number one, the expectation is that the customer is able to receive cash. That's the whole output or outcome expected out of this whole event. And number two could be, if you withdraw $500 from your bank account, the expectation from the customer is that they should have received cash. Also, the expectation is that your bank account should drop by $500. So these are the post conditions. Now, a normal flow or a basic flow explains the sequence of events that have to take place once the event is triggered. A basic flow explains what happens when the trigger event is initiated. What are the normal steps that have to be, that have to follow once the event is triggered? So, like I said, the trigger event is the customer inserting the ATM card. Number two, the customer enters the PIN, and the user chooses the language, English or Spanish. Now, system validates if the customer belongs to the bank network, if they have a valid account with their bank or some of their partner banks. Okay. Now the system now prompts the user to select the transaction type. If it is going to be withdrawal or deposit or transfer, or what is the user trying to do here? If the user selects withdrawal, then he selects from checking account or savings account or whatever accounts the user has with a particular bank. And then the system prompts the user to enter the withdrawal amount. So and then we just not entered all the steps because now you get a picture of what the basic flow is. And then the system injects the ATM card. So the customer walks into an ATM machine, and inserts the ATM card, performs his or her transaction, and withdraws cash and walks away after pulling out the ATM card. Now, this is the basic flow or the normal steps that are followed. When the these are the sequence of events that are expected in a normal condition, or also called as basic flow in terms of use case language. So these are some of the jargons that you have to understand. So if somebody asks you, what do you document as part of your use case diagram, you should be able to say, I would record the actors involved in this particular use case. I would record the preconditions, postconditions, and the basic flow. Okay.
Okay.
You would also describe, give a quick description of your use case along with the trigger event. Okay. And then once you have recorded your basic flow, you would explain alternate flows. What are alternate flows? Alternate flows are, other flows that could be possible, but does not fit into the basic flow. Now you want to keep your flows as simple as possible. Okay.
Okay.
So now let's say alternative flows are nothing but if conditions, right? Or a different route that the user takes. For example, let's say you're using a different bank's network or a different bank's ATM. The system would want to charge you in network fee of maybe $2 or $3 or $1, depending upon the agreement between your bank and the ATM of the bank you are using. So let's say, if you are a customer of this particular bank, then you don't see some of these steps, right? Yes. So those steps are reserved only for other customers, in the sense customers of other banks. So that would qualify as an alternative flow. So the core concept here is your basic flow is the normal activity or the normal sequence of events performed when a particular user goes in, triggers the event and then completes the transaction. Now, okay. An alternative flow is something that could be an addendum or a different route to the existing sequence of events. For example, a request for a network fee. All right. Let's say now if the user accepts. If the user accepts, you return back to your original basic flow. If you look at 4.4a, step 4.4a, it says in step 4 of the normal flow or the basic flow, the system identifies if you have an account, if you belong to the bank's network, right? Okay. Now, if the answer is no, then this alternative flow would be triggered. If not, if the answer for this is yes, then you would come back to the original basic flow. Yep, you would move on to step 5. Now, if you are a different bank, if you belong to a different bank's network, then you would come back to the same to the alternative flow, and it would ask if you accept for the network fee. Now, if the customer accepts, you would go back to the basic flow. Now, Similarly, if the customer declines, the transaction is terminated. So on this, use case returns to step 9 of the normal flow, which is ejecting the ATM card.
Okay.
So basic flow is the normal flow that is expected, on a majority basis. This is how the system most likely is going to be used. But you cannot specify that, hey, this is the majority, so I'll just leave the system here. No. There is a possibility that there are other alternative flows that are possible, and you don't want to keep all those within the basic flow because you want the basic flow to be simple and to the point. But you also acknowledge the fact that, hey, this is the basic flow, but I'm not saying this is all the system is going to perform. There are other flows that are possible, and then you would list them as alternative flows. So now it is more clear to the user who reads your requirements and understanding what is the expectation and what would be the interaction between the actor and the system.
Okay.
All right. Now there are also exceptions that you could mention. All right. So error conditions. Okay. For example, if the user enters the user belongs to your bank or to other bank network, irrelevant of that, if there are any error messages or error transactions or error conditions that exist, so you give that as exceptions because that is not a normal flow. There is not an alternative flow. There is not another, there is not part of the basic flow. So as soon as the event is triggered, there is an error condition of the user, entering some, and these are exceptional cases, as the name suggests. These are again simple layman language being used, but in a refined format. So if it is a exceptional condition, like an error condition, then like the user entering a wrong PIN, then you go through this step. Use case resumes on step 3 of normal flow only when the customer enters the wrong PIN.
Okay.
Now you could go on with these steps, continue with the steps, like let's say the customer enters wrong PIN again. So here you could say maybe after 3 attempts you lock your ATM card or something like that.
Okay.
All right. So then there is includes, and I'll come to includes when I take you through the diagram.
Okay.
As of now, you have understood what is a basic flow, what is an alternative flow, and what are exceptions.
Correct.
Awesome. So now, there are other details. Like I said, these are not mandatory. Frequency of use, how often. These are basically done for the designers to understand what option to choose when they build the system based on the volume. It could be, let's say, 50 per hour, or 50 transactions per hour, or 200 per day, or once a week, once a year, on whatever. Basically, a system can be built in any fashion. There is no one single way to build this system. There are multiple ways the system could be built. So the designers would get an idea on what approach to use to build the system based on some of the information present here. So the frequency of use is one such column provided here to make the designers understand the approach to follow. Special requirements, if any, so again, if there is any special requirements, like do you need an audio so that maybe if you want blind people to use your system, then that's an option. So any special requirements would be mentioned here. And then some of the assumptions. Okay. Now you assume that your customer knows English. Now, if your customer does not know English, then it's not possible for them. These are close to preconditions, But you can also, I just gave you an example. We talked about assumptions and constraints before, right?
Yes.
Assumptions are things that you're certain, but not, you think they are right, but you're not sure of. So you don't want to get in trouble or confuse the users later. So you document them clearly that you're assuming that all users know either English or Spanish. Okay. And then any notes, like notes or constraints can be documented here, like in what should be the size of the pin. It should be a 4-digit number or a 5-digit number, or can the user use the same? If the user loses the pin, can they have the same pin again, or do they have to keep changing their pin every 90 days, or maybe some special notes can be provided here.
Okay.
And similarly, if you have 100 use cases for a particular requirement, you continue with the narratives here to the next, and then you repeat the same for all use cases. So basically, this is one narrative for one use case.
Okay.
All right. So I'll let you, I'll give you a minute to quickly look at all these contents, so you know exactly what are the contents of a use case narrative.
Okay. No, but is this template? I didn't see this template in the knowledge base. Is it available in the knowledge base as well?
Yes, it is available on the knowledge base. You can search on Google for use case template by MindsMapped, or use case narrative, either one of those names, use case narrative or use case template by MindsMapped.
Yeah, it came right up actually.
No worries. Have a look at this now. You can look at the knowledge base later.
Okay.
So that's the end of narratives. We have seen all the contents except includes. I'm going to explain you includes and extends, two different concepts with the use case diagram. So can you read this paragraph for me, Marlon?
Sure. A use case describes the behavior of a business system from the business user's point of view. It should describe in plain business terms how the user interacts with the system, assuming it is an online use case, and what the system does in response. It does not determine how the system works internally. That is, it does not define the implementation.
Awesome. So a use case describes the behavior of a business system from a business user's point of view. Like I said, we conduct projects for various domains, let's say a bank or an insurance company or a healthcare organization or a government project. Now, the users or the operations team or the business team does not understand software and how software and the technology used in the background, but they would explain to you what they're expecting from the system to perform. So a use case describes the behavior of the business system, the software application, from the business user's point of view. The bank employees might be able to explain you, hey, I need an ATM machine. We want the user to come in, validate their PIN, and then be able to withdraw cash. And then when you drill down, as a business analyst, when you drill down, they would explain you, on the preconditions, the postconditions, the basic flows, and then you further drill down. You get all this information, and then you collate all those data and prepare a use case, which makes it clear and it will be easier for everybody to understand, right?
Correct.
So the description is usually presented in text. Now we have seen And also, the use case does not explain what are the technology in the background or how it works and all those things. No. Remember, as a business analyst, we are documenting what the users expect or how the users expect the system to behave. All right.
Okay.
So the description of a use case is usually presented in text. We are just seeing the use case narrative or the use case description, right?
Correct.
So again, like I said, it might vary from organization to organization, the naming conventions and stuff, but the core concept of use case remains the same. Okay, and while creating use case diagrams, we are not going to show some of those narratives like preconditions or postconditions or some of the other explanations over there. Okay.
Okay.
So we know that the use case is divided into basic flow or the normal flow and alternative flows. Okay. The other names for basic flows are main success scenario. You can make a note of it. Or happy day scenario.
Okay.
So, like I said, it describes the straightforward execution of the basic activity that is performed by the actor with the system and the response expected from the system. Okay, so it's the basic flow is also referred to in some organizations as normal flow or the main success scenario or happy day scenario. And the alternate flows are also known by other names such as exceptions or extensions.
Okay.
Okay. These would be a little different from the main flows, but it doesn't mean that alternative flows are not important. We try to keep the basic flow as simple as possible so that users would not get confused with a lot of go to step 5 and go to step 9 and go to step 101. Because remember and be aware of the fact that we are looking at a very simple use case now for understanding the concepts. In real world, there might be complex scenarios.
Yes.
Right. So it might be like, say, calculation of interest rates based for a user for a particular month. There might be number of scenarios like what if the user maintains a balance of so much? What is the calculation? And what would be the scenario if the user fails to maintain the minimum balance? And what if there might be hundreds of fees involved? There might be some funds transfer to your savings account each time you make a debit card transaction or you make a purchase. So, by the time you calculate the balance of a particular user's bank account, there are multiple complex calculations that happen in the background. And so it might be lengthy, but in this case, we are using a simple example to understand the concepts better at this point. So realize the fact that trying to keep the basic flow as simple as possible should be the focus of a business analyst. So at this point, we are just trying to, keep the basic flow as simple as possible, the normal flow of events, and then we are trying to segregate all the other alternative flows and or exceptions or extensions. Okay. So remember, you can have as many number of alternative flows. As long as you keep it simple, it's fine. Okay?
Okay.
But always remember that the basic flow should be crisp and clear, and you should be aware of what the basic flow is, or the happy day scenario, or the main success scenario. Okay? And then each step is usually numbered so that Again, if you want to say, go back to step 1 or go back to step 3, that's easy if you number all your steps, right? If you do not have a number, then you're going to land in trouble. You're not going to go, use that go-tos and stuff like that.
Okay.
So this is, again, the next example. We were talking about an ATM. Now we are looking at an example of a sales assistant taking a customer order. Okay, as simple as that. So this would be the diagram, the use case diagram. You look at this, you're seeing a sales assistant, this is the actor, and this is the system, and the actor is performing a take customer order. This is the activity that is being performed by the actor along with the system. So what are the basic flows? Actor enters the customer details. Actor enters code for the product required. System displays product details. Actor enters quantity required. Actor enters payment details. System saves the customer order. So this is a very basic flow of how a sales assistant satisfies a customer order on a software system. The first thing that the sales assistant does is enter the customer details.
Okay.
So now he would enter the code for the products that are required. System displays the product details, and then the sales assistant would enter the quantity required and enter the payment details and close the customer order. Okay. So now the alternative flow here would be, as soon as the quantity is entered, instead of going to the payment, you might also want to check if the customer has more than one product to be billed. So here, repeat steps 2 to 4 for additional products. That's an alternative flow.
Okay.
So until the user, until the sales assistant enters the number of products required, this would continue. Resume at system 5 to enter payment details, right?
Okay.
So what you see here is basically the basic flow talks about fulfilling a customer order, and alternative flow talks about additional products to be entered. This is the use case, and this is the use case diagram, and this is the use case explanation provided. Now, there are organizations that just go for the use case narrative in this fashion, and then there are also organizations that go for a detailed use case narrative like the one we saw before. Okay? So, now we have just revised what is the basic flow and what is an alternative flow. We have seen 2 examples for the basic flow and alternative flow. One is the ATM example, and one is the sales assistant taking a customer order. Now, I told you, let's go to a diagram before we look into includes and extends. We're going to learn what is include and extends now. Now, I also told you, a use case will have only one basic flow, but it can have as many number of alternative flows. There's no restriction to it. Similarly, there might be cases where some of the basic flow events or alternative flow events are not only used by this particular customer, by this particular use case, but shared by many use cases. When you are writing the requirements for a particular module, you understand the fact that there is going to be multiple use cases, multiple diagrams required to explain the system. Now, some of those use cases might have certain steps that are common to all use cases, right?
Correct.
For example, not only the use case for placing a customer order uses the customer details. This is one use case where the sales assistant is performing, or satisfying a customer order. So in this, we did see that actor enters customer details. Okay. Now let's say in the same software system we are using a different use case for managing returns. Let's say a customer wants to return some of the previously purchased products or goods. So you would be creating a separate use case for managing returns. So obviously, when you're managing returns, you might want to, accept the customer's details in that use case as well. In this case, it would be prudent to keep the customer details as a separate use case and include them in your basic flow. So it does not make your customer order use case bigger one or make it more complex or confusing.
Okay.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, it would. Are you saying it would be like a separate use case procedure by itself that can be included in? Okay.
Absolutely. When you know that there is a particular, there are a particular few steps that could be kept separate because they are common and could be used by various use cases. In those conditions, we can create a separate use case and keep that separate. For example, like I said, if somebody wants to return faulty goods, that's a different use case. But that also needs the identified customer. Basically, you want to know who this customer is before you execute the returns. Similarly, you're recording all your customer details while you take the customer order as well. So you could keep identify customer as a separate use case and then include that particular use case within your existing use case. And to do that, you use the include functionality. Know what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah, I understand.
So what you would do is first go ahead, do not worry about includes or alternative flows when you do your first draft of your use case. During your first draft, what you would do is, first come up with all the steps. And then you would have a look at it and realize, your whole idea is to keep your basic flow simple as possible. So in these cases, what you would do is ensure that all those alternative flows are separated out. And then you would look at possibilities to identify or segregate all those steps that are repeated or are common to different use cases. You push them apart as an individual use case, and then use the include option to bring them into your basic flow. So that's the whole idea of include.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying now?
Yes.
Awesome. So now in this case, let us have a quick look at the definition. The include relationship allows us to include the steps from one use case into another. This is valuable when the included steps occur as a recognizable sequence in many different contexts. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So how do we achieve this? So the use case diagram would look like this. You have a take customer order, which is a use case where we saw the basic flows and alternative flows. And then we realized that, the first step, which is identifying customer, is being used in a different use case as well. So hence we segregated that as a separate use case, and we are using the include function to use that particular flow. And this is how the use case diagram would look in this case. And this would be the basic flow of your new use case, which is identify customer. Let us look at the basic flow for identify customer now. Active enter search criteria. It could be the surname and postcode, or it could be the social security number, or it could be the customer's last name and date of birth, whatever. Every organization might have their own search criteria depending on the nature of their business, right? So if it is a financial organization, they might ask you for your social security. I think these days they are not allowed to ask for social security. So they would ask you for your last name and PIN code, or last name and and date of birth, something like that to, so that if they type John, they might, the system might pull up 150 Johns. So they might have some certain criteria to exactly spot the customer details. Now, there might be organizations where you just hand over your customer card to them. You might be assigned a separate number, so it makes it easier for the sales assistant to search your record. So system displays matching customers. Actor selects the customer. System displays customer details. Actor confirms the customer. Now, if you look at it, you know that this basic flow is common for both placing an order and return faulty goods. So this can be used as a separate use case. Now, obviously, this basic flow could also have a alternative flow. Now, when the system, let's say the customer is not an existing customer, the actor, while placing an order, should be able to create a new record. So that would be an alternative flow in this case. Now, return faulty goods might not use alternative flow. That's all right. It might use the basic flow.
Okay.
Now that we have separated this as a separate use case, what do we do to include this within the customer, placing an order use case? The actor records customer details, and then the details of this is included with the use case name. Include identify customer. Now, we have kept the basic flow simple by not including all these details within your basic flow. Now, this is, again, the take customer order. This is the first use case we saw.
Okay.
Actor records the customer details, blah, 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 until step 6. So this was the initial example we saw for the very basic simple use case. All right?
Okay.
So then so now we know how to use the include function. Now, why can't this be added as an alternative flow? It can be added as an alternative flow. But then we realized that, hey, this is being used by other use cases. So instead of having it in all the use cases where it is being used, we'll keep the number of steps smaller by pulling it out of all the 2 or 5 or 10 use cases that use these steps, keep it as a separate use case, and include it in wherever it is required. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome.
Sure.
So now we know what are basic flows. We know that alternative flows are, possible steps or sequence of events that could occur within the same use case. And we also know that we could keep some of the common steps for different use cases separate and then include them into the use cases using the include option. All right?
Okay.
Now, what is extend relationship? Now, extend relationships are not very different from alternative flows, but it is additional functionalities to your existing use case. All right. For example, we saw that we are entering product details. Let's say in some cases it is possible for you to tailor make, or you have to specify like the color of the product or size of the product or any special special requirement of the customers. That's another flow. You could use the extend function and again keep that as a separate use case and extend the use case to the new use case that we have created it. Now, this is a little bit confusing because it is not very different from an alternative flow. It's just that you're trying to keep it outside because this is seldom used. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah. Now people look at basic flows and alternative flows, and then you don't want to give scenarios over scenarios over scenarios and then make your use case really, really big. Like I said, as a business analyst, you would always try to keep your basic flows and alternative flows simple. So you're again pulling out some of the very rarely used scenarios or steps separately and keeping your basic and alternative flows intact. Can you read this paragraph for me?
Sure. However, the new functionality may open up a whole raft of possibilities, and there's a danger that the alternative flow spawns further subflows. The use case may become bloated and difficult to manage. To avoid this, the extend relationship can be used to pull the alternative flow and its subflow out into a new use case. The extend relationship says that we execute the primary use case, but when we get to a specified point in the flow, if the right conditions are met, we perform some different steps. Clearly, this is very similar to an alternative flow. The advantage is that the alternative flow and any dependent subflows have been moved into a separate use case.
Awesome. Can you read this now?
Yeah, sure. The extend relationship allows us to modify the behavior of the base use case. Suppose we want to sell products that are made to order and require a degree of customer specification. For these products, we will need to record the customer's additional requirements, such as size and color. In this case, we're adding something extra to the flow of the base use case.
Awesome. This is how it looks when extended. Now remember the arrows here. So this take customer order and return faulty goods are pointing towards identify customer because identify is being included. These are referring to this particular use case. And extend is actually being a part of the basic flow or alternative flow. It's a extended function. Now take customer order and return faulty goods include this. So include is mentioned within the basic flow.
Okay.
But in this case, this is not mentioned within the basic flow.
Okay.
They would extend themselves when required. They would pitch in when that specific scenario occurs.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, then there is generalization relationship. So again, return faulty goods and take customer order, they all fall under the handle customer transaction umbrella. You don't have to worry a lot about generalization at this point, but just remember that if there is a question asked on generalization, you should be able to explain that, hey, if there are 4 or 5 use cases that fall within an umbrella, then that's generalization. It basically looks like it's child-parent relationship.
Okay.
So here, the sales assistant is trying to invoke some kind of customer transaction, and it could be a return faulty goods or take customer order. All right.
Okay.
Okay, and then there is some theory which I'll let you read after this session, and while preparing your use case, you could have a look at all these, and then now you will understand the whole concept of business analysis, of use cases and use case narrative, and how to